In this video, I want to show you how to rotate the tires on your vehicle. In this tutorial, I'm using 4 jack stands as well as a lug wrench. You can also use a socket and any kind of driver you wish, a torque wrench, your vehicle's manual, and a floor jack. For the first step, I'm going to park the car on a level surface. There needs to be ample room on each side of the vehicle as well as in front to get the floor jack. You also need to pull the emergency brake and make sure it is in gear. At this point, you could also put the jack stands at each of the 4 corners so you could have them ready. Next up, I'm going to look in the car manual and see where the specific jacking points are. So on this car, they're at these locations right here. There's an illustration showing where you could put a jack. Next up, I'm going to loosen the lug nuts. So to do this, just put your wrench or lug wrench on, break them until they're just loose. The reason I'm doing this now is because when this is in the air, I won't be able to put a torque in here other than the brake, and it's possible that it'll just continue to rotate when you try to loosen these. So I'm only going to loosen them now. I'm going to go in a cross pattern. So I just did this one, then I'm going to go here, here, and here. Now I'm going to do this to all 4 tires. I'm going to jack up the front end of the vehicle. So to do this, I'm going to make sure there's a flat part to put the jack. In my case, I always use this frame member right here. So I just make sure it's flush and centered, and I start jacking it up until it makes contact. Wiggle it, make sure it's solidly contacting, and then continue to jack it up. I want to jack it up so there's at least an inch or so underneath the tires, just so you have plenty of room to take them off. Next, I'm going to put the jack stands under the indicated locations from the manual. Next, I'm going to slowly lower the floor jack until the front of the car is resting on the jack stand. So to do that, just rotate this and it'll release hydraulic fluid. So I'm going to leave this here, and I'm just going to check to make sure that it's fully rested on the jack stand and it's stable. Now that I know it's stable, I can completely remove the floor jack and go to the rear of the vehicle. Repeat the process I just did for the front. So I'm going to find a place to put the floor jack. In my case, there isn't really a good spot right here that's reinforced other than this hook. So I just balance it on the hook and it lifts it right up. You just got to be careful it doesn't start rotating to one side. If you can, it's best to put it on the frame like right there. But it's about 3 feet underneath the car from the rear. So it's really hard to get the floor jack that far in. Now I'm just going to put the floor jacks in place. Now you can lower the floor jack and have it fully rest on the jack stands. However, I'm just going to leave it in place as a safety measure. Now I'm going to remove all 4 tires and just set them aside wherever they are. And make sure you do not lose track of your lug nuts. Just set them aside. You want to keep each set separate from the others. Be very careful not to damage these studs right here. Avoid letting the rim move at an angle. Try to keep it as perpendicular as possible when you pull out, and try not to let it rub directly on the threads. Now it's time to decide how you will position the tires. So if they're one directional, meaning there should be an arrow showing just one direction, so it can only be installed in that direction of travel. In that case, you can only move the rear to the front and the front to the rear. So there's only one way you could do that. If they are two directional, meaning they are symmetric, they could function both going this way and this way. There's 2 different options. There's the same as the first option, where you would just replace the rear with the fronts. But there's also the option of doing them in an X pattern. So you would take this one, flip it around, and put it here on this side, and the same for here. Mine are 2 directional, however, I'm just going to choose the first option since I don't see any abnormal wear. So I'm just going to take the front tire right here, move it right here, take this rear tire, and put it in the front. Now I'm going to remount the tire. So I'm going to line up the lug holes right here with the plugs right here. So I'm going to get as close as possible. Look right here. I'm actually going to poke it through slightly on the top one. Line up the other 4 and support it as best as I can and slide it on. Once it's on, I'm just going to start a few of these lug nuts. You want to go about 2 or 3 threads is all you need. Now with whatever tool you have, you can quickly make them up. First, push the tire flush against the hub. Tighten them up. You don't want to torque them at all. I'm just going to do this to quickly make them up. So as soon as it starts bottoming out, I'm going to remove the tool. As a fail-safe, I'm going to put this on the lowest torque setting there is, just so I can't torque them at all. I'm also going to alternate them, just like I loosened them. So I'm going to go here, 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 here. And if there's still some to be made up, I'm going to go back and repeat the pattern. I'm going to repeat this on all 4 tires. With the tires hand tightened, it's time to torque them to spec. So again, I'm going to look in the manual and it'll tell you the torque spec to use. In this case, I'm going to use 80 foot-pounds. There's a big difference between a small car and a big truck, so you have to do this correctly. My F-150, for instance, is 150 pounds, almost twice this torque value. So I'm going to get the socket, attach it to the torque wrench. Then I'm going to go to the foot-pounds part, so you can see the foot-pounds is right here. To use this, you put the 0 mark where these indicators are. Let's see if I could zoom in. So right now I'd be at 10 foot-pounds. So I'm going to tighten it until I get to the 8 mark, which is right here. There's the 80, and you see the line is right here. So I'm going to match up the 0 to that mark. So here I am. You can see the bottom mark of the 80 is right at the 0. So I know that is 80 foot-pounds for this torque wrench. So, and then I'm just going to turn this to lock it in place. And make sure this is set to tighten. So you could also go the other way. Make sure it's on tighten. Tires are in the air. If you attempt to put torque on here and you only have the brake holding it, it'll likely spin. So what I'm going to do first is drop the car onto the ground. You don't have to do this. You could put a block, wedge it between the ground and the tire, and you'll be able to apply the torque. Since I've already hand tightened the lug nuts, I'm just going to lower it and apply the torque after I lower the car. Taking the car off the jack stands is the exact same as putting them on. With the car lowered, I'll be able to apply the torque now without having to do anything extra. So to start out with, I'm going to start at one of the lug nuts, tighten it fairly tight, not all the way though, so this should not click. Then I'm going to go to the crossways one, then I'm going to go to this one and this one. You always want to go in alternating patterns, creating a star pattern. The reason you do this is you do not want to warp the brake pad or the hub. And if you apply torque way down here and go all the way to the 80 foot-pounds, it'll warp it like this. And then you'll have issues whenever you brake. So I'm just going to tighten this one down. Now they're fairly tight, so now I'm going to torque them to the full 80 foot-pounds. So I'm going to start the one I began with. And make sure to support it down here. If you apply just the force right here without holding it, what this will do is try to put a moment on the bolt, and you're not putting the actual torque into the fastener. So hold it down here. Put your hand right here. Try to apply only torque and not force, trying to take the socket off the nut. So you reach the torque whenever this makes that loud click, and you can feel it move. So it's actually flexing a spring, and that means you reached the full torque value. So I'm going to remove it, do the one above it, click. So I'm just going to go through the cycle once more just to make sure everything is at the same torque. Now that's fully torqued. Now I'm going to do this to the other 3. Now all you need to do is drive roughly 50 to 100 miles. What will happen is these lug nuts will likely loosen up a tiny bit. Then you will need to retorque them again to the 80 foot-pounds or whatever your manual calls for. After that's done, they should not loosen and you should be done. And that is how to rotate your tires. Thanks for watching.